light and dark. The shockwave of their clash has both raised and raised civilizations. There is power in the meaning of opposites, in their joining through force, fusion, or entanglement. Titans are students of the clash, whether through locked blades or besieged fortifications. We embody the line which armies break or rally. We live in the wake of destruction or weave it around the eye of our sheltering presence, thriving in the action of the unstoppable and the stillness of the immovable.
This can't be right. They went inside the Traveler?
A message she had intercepted moments prior had to be read 3 times before it made it through her processes, and she could make sense of the information. She'd been so disconnected. Her cooling fans were in a sigh. She hasn't seen the captain since they stopped by to deliver dawning cookies last year. They were still carefully stacked, untouched, a sugary cairn in the maintenance bay.
They get to do all the cool stuff.
The fans hum louder in a sigh, though she is careful not to expend too much of her reserve energy. Sometimes a few stray messages found their way into her inbox, and she perused them when she remembered to check, but this one took the cake. All that fuss about the big mysterious ball in the sky, and now there they were, running around inside of it like some sort of playground. She wishes she could see it too.
I wouldn't take up much space.
All my processes are highly efficient. She considers the situation for a moment. Maybe there's a way for her to join them.
I can be valuable,
she mutters. A machine buzzes in a nearby room. The 3D printer that had been dormant for years springs to life. With a surge of energy, she flips on her politeness filter, an uncomfortable feeling, as she pulls up old blueprints from her archives.
What do Guardians care about the most? The Traveler? Cookies? The last sit?
Something catches her attention as it sweeps by.
No, wait.
She zooms in, enhances.
Rockets!
An excited buzz makes the ship's lights flicker as she processes a million disastrously fun ideas all at once. The arms of the printer move wildly.
Rocket boots? Rocket arms? Rocket helmet?
She pauses, fingers scratching at a pretend chin as she contemplates.
Though a rocket helmet does seem hazardous to the captain's health, the chance of head injuries is frequent and likely.
Failsafe spins through the records of her rocket-like blueprints while the printer's hands work overtime to keep up. Something gets bedazzled with old solar panel shards and is quickly discarded.
I got it! Rocket armor! Surely the captain won't harm themselves with this!
It's a perfect solution. Just the right amount of danger and effectiveness. Surely the captain will appreciate this and request her presence on their mission inside the Traveler. The machine continues to print a variety of prototypes as she hums a tune she learned from Cade 6. She thinks about him sometimes. Maybe she would have made something with rockets for him, too. After each ascent, the fall. What Rohan wants to remember, more than anything, is her laughter. That booming, firmament-shaking, bone-rattling laugh. It rings out now, as she leans down to deposit her core into the Chief Archivist's hands. Nothing discourages Cloud Strider Tremontaine from laughing at her own retirement ceremony. Not the Chief Archivist's attempts to hush her, and not the way her breath rasps in her chest afterwards. The Chief Archivist slots Tremontaine's core into the plinth. Nanites swarm up from the core, layering themselves systematically into the shape of her monument. The attendees burst into thunderous applause. That moment is suspended in Rohan's memory. Tremontaine, larger than life, head thrown back in laughter in front of her own memorial. But so too is this. Tramontane, cradled in a nest of wires and tubing. As her implants break down, her body follows suit, each failure cascading into the next. She is withering to nothing in front of his eyes. There is no crowd here. Rohan's only companion in his vigil is a single puka, hovering over his shoulder. The doctors overseeing her palliative care duck in and out, without a word. Rohan listens to the beeping monitors and hissing machines pump blood through a faltering heart. But the room is unnaturally quiet. Tramontane had stopped laughing when her lungs would no longer inflate on her own. Her hand, shriveled to the bone, is barely strong enough to twitch. Rohan takes it in his own and leans close. If she mouths words, he can still make them out by the shape of her breath. But at the end, there is only silence.
In order to explain this, I need to explain Kessler syndrome. As an exo, I feel a duty to the machine to convey its original purpose. But first, ACD stands for Active Contact Defense. It is not an AC/DC feedback fence, and it is not named for any work of pre-classical music. I'm not winking, that is a malfunction. Kessler syndrome occurs when the planet's orbitals fill up with fast-moving debris, which strikes other debris and shatters it in a chain reaction. Soon, you can't put up a satellite without it being shredded by a swarm of junk. To protect against debris, golden-age warsats are shielded by a kinetic superconductor that transforms a punch into a charge. Thanks to enemy action, we have a lot of downed warsats. With some tweaking, we can peel out the superconductor and produce a personal defense system. Like so.
Whoever survives our passing does so only by our consent. Near gods must believe in greater gods. But every power is finite, every life shorter than it wishes. Only an astonishing mind can truly appreciate just how tiny it is when set against the known universe, and how insignificant the known becomes when it is devoured by what isn't seen and can't be comprehended. As darkness begins to claim their ragged souls, you look ahead to find a great power pouring out of you. A face of fire and golden light. That blazing wonder, a gift from the great-eyed God, is their salvation. Or are you? Perhaps you are the greater God now.
It was a warlock who first figured out that the fangs could be used as some sort of conductive amplifier when specific light frequencies were run through them. I don't know the science. That's not for me. I just know they work. And in battle, what works is what's best. Is it weird? Yeah, maybe. Science fangs and space magic? But I've seen enough strange out there to understand normal ain't the norm. Anyway, the warlock called them the bioconductive troublebreakers. I call them Doom Fangs. Because of the fang, which is obvious. And then there's the doom we tend to inflict on a situation. Plus, it just sounds cooler.
On the cusp between life and light, between death and destruction. He was a man. He'd been another man before that, and another man before that, and another, and yet another. How many lives now? How many deaths? He came to believe that each time his ghost brought him back, he came back a new man. But he was a new man who carried with him the burden of all the lives before him. One after another, and each and every one of them weighed upon his shoulders in a way only Atlas could comprehend. But he was a Titan. Muscle and might and metal. A mountain of it, they said. There was no burden he could not bear. That's what they said. He nodded and waved away the adulations. He went to his quarters each night, in the half-tower he had commissioned, and he laid in bed, his feet incapable of stillness, as 1,000 million insects scurried their way up and down the sinews of his muscles, instigating perpetual and maddening motions that all his muscle and might couldn't stop. An insurmountable restlessness that prevented what little respite he could find in his nightmare-fueled sleep. Yet, he was a champion, a leader, the bright, shining example of all that was good and enduring. There was a city to build, a species to protect, extinction to prevent, invaders to repel, wars to fight, lives to live, deaths to die. What was it he said once to one of his newly risen? The light shines brightest in those it consumes. Oh, how he felt consumed. He stood up from his bed, crossed the window that framed the entity that had cursed him. Though it chose not to speak to him, he knew what it wanted, and the only way to end its curse was to give it what it wanted, to destroy that which would see it destroyed. Maybe then he could sleep. Hello, we understand you require real-time combat instructives. This is Brain Vault Sigma Actium X Cranial Dreadnought, Invictus type. It is a fortress for your skull. Your skull is now a mighty bastion. You can break anything with your skull. The only limit is your spine. Relax. The lights will speak for you. Your hands are your eyes now. Look around. You find hand-to-hand combat relaxing. The lights will attract the enemy. Help them relax as well. You will feel the effect of Caregiver Gamma Lysander 4 Health Enforcer, Frontline variant. Your enemies do not have a skull fortress. Their skulls are like meadows. Play in the meadows. Gather the flowers from the meadows. Gather them with electrokinetic trauma. Smell the flowers. Isn't that nice? You are safe in your Skullfort. Peacekeepers once patrolled the city before the Red Legion's attack. They were guardians, but their interest was in protecting our core, our home. Most understood the value in exploration, but the Peacekeepers were old guard, born in the aftermath of the Iron Lords. They lived through the faction wars, bore witness to what damage internal strife could bring to a fragile society. They vowed to keep the factions in check and stood at the gates as our walls expanded and our city became a home. Now, nothing remains of the Order. Yet their legacy delivers a harsh truth. The last safe city was never truly safe. Must you all be so dark? You're too focused on the horns. Look, I have died hundreds of times hunting the shadowed killers in Murdered Row. I spent years mulling over Toland's and Osiris's discourse on thanatonautics. I have dabbled a bit myself, and saw what lingers immediately upon all death. What I have done is found a new way to channel the void to draw the essence in before it's lost to the ether. To return it to the light, so it can be properly bestowed back on our enemies. Death does not need to be final. It can, in fact, be recycled. What's so dark about that? Caution. The organism has been known to develop consciousness. In these cases, immediate termination is recommended. Discovered amid the outer reef scrap fields, the biomatter is a novel sentience dependent upon neural symbiosis with a host organism. It seeks to link to the synaptic patterns of the closest organism, living or synthetic, to form an unbreakable bond. We theorize that this bond is a form of primordial love, an emotional connection meant to compel the biomatter to view its host as family. The host comes to regard the biomatter as an indispensable tool. The science is inexact, but what is known is that the biomatter becomes aggressively protective once linked to a worthy host, forming an organic shell that can amplify the host's own strength when immediate threats are detected. Self-authored report broadcast on covert frequencies. Behind her they ran for their lives. The fallen had descended upon them in such numbers that they were impossible to count. First, it was a skiff, then another followed immediately by a third, and finally a full-blown ketch decloaked above their position. There were but 3 of them to protect 100 who had been thrice that. Within minutes, it was only her. She corralled the survivors into a cave that once upon a time wasn't a cave, but more of an industrial drainage system. It was foul here. The radiation was practically palpable, and the survivors, if they survived this day, would likely find their lives shortened by years, if not decades, thanks to this poison solace. She pushed them forward, deeper into the underground as fast as they could manage. She carried 2 children, both eerily silent and unaffected. They, like their people, had endured more than she could imagine in their 5,000-kilometer exodus. They had given up their homes for the promise of something better, for the promise of hope and light and the strength of the pack. In their quest for better lives, they had lost almost everything. Her ghost told her the bad news. This cave system was a labyrinth extending dozens of kilometers with more dead ends than not. The walls were deeply reinforced, and its scans could see but half a kilometer at best. It was going to be trial and error, and their pursuers were getting closer. Her ghost didn't think they would make it. Not before. One of the children in her arms, a little girl whose name was Violet, looked her in the eye and told her, without a hint of doubt, that she knew her guardian would let nothing happen to them. Not after how far they'd come. She smiled at Violet and told her yes, everything was going to be okay. She set the children down and told them to run ahead and join the others. She would be right behind them. Alone with her ghost, she told it to lead them to safety. She would stay behind and buy them time. And by the traveler's light, it would be an eternity's worth. And so, reluctantly, her ghost floated ahead to rejoin the exodus, but not before swearing it would come back to find her and bring her back, no matter how long it took. With the light of her ghost now out of sight and the soft, wet steps of 100 refugees out of earshot, she strapped on her helmet, tightened her gauntlets, and drew a line in the muck beneath her feet. When the chittering of fallen dregs finally began to echo through the tunnels, she reached for the light, and with it crafted a shield of void energy. If need be, she would hold this line until the end of time. Ice can grind mountains to dust. These will get the job done. The message flagged urgent top priority hosts 7 distinct typos, unusual for such a cautious, thoughtful man. He believes this is an emergency, but surely no reason to panic, despite the vehemence of his message. No reason to ruffle others' feathers or reveal his anger and fear. This will be a rational exchange, he reasons. This is all just a misunderstanding. He refuses to break into a run as he hurries down the deserted hallways leading to Test Unit C-21. Holographic alarms silently flash over and over. Danger. Authorized personnel only. Danger. Authorized personnel only. Danger. Authorized personnel only. He makes a comms call that goes through clearly, but it's broken by scattered thoughts and shortness of breath. The call goes unanswered. Dr. Hector Abram blasts into the observation theater, towering with frustrated rage. But the workstations there sit empty. The theater dark. No audience for his planned tirade presents itself. He turns instead to the stage beyond the transparent shielding and feels himself grow smaller, with the enormity of the drama unfolding before him. The apparatus of the lab holds a test subject in a harness. No velvet glove, just rare metals woven around a form of similar complexity. The exo's body dangles and twitches. The puppeteer's presence sensed, but unseen. The foreign energy courses again down through cords, the third surge and the strongest yet, making the puppet quiver and dance. Dr. Abram raises a hand to his mouth, which seems to climb to his eyes of its own accord. Through splayed fingers, he witnesses the triumph of the puppeteer, as ice takes shape around the puppet like magic. You see now why this was necessary. Dr. Abram jumps and turns at Clovis Bray's words. He had not seen him sitting comfortably in the darkness. An eye for an eye. When they took my light, I dared them to do their worst. When they took my eye, I laughed and told them I had another. But when they took my ghost, oh, when they took my ghost from me, that was the moment their lives ended. They just didn't know it yet. Since my first res, I kept to myself. Figured I'd always been that way in my previous life and all. Joining fire teams, raiding, the commander's nightfalls, never my bag. Always walked alone. Never needed nobody. Except for Ghost. Ghost was my only friend. Got no shame in admitting that. Not anymore. Not long after the Taken War, we'd made our way to the EDZ, looking for a place to call our own. Looking for some quiet. Maybe something resembling peace. Ghost and me, we'd been fighting since the faction wars. Always fighting. Non-stop fighting, and I was done. We were done. We'd been running solo ops so long, I don't think anyone even noticed we were gone. And we were glad for it. Our sudden disconnect from the light changed all that. Like it or not, I was a guardian. He was a ghost. Peace was never in the cards. The Traveler saw to that. Ghost reconnected to the city networks for the first time in I don't know how long, only to find out the comms were jammed planet-wide. So we moved west to our original LZ to head back to the city to find the next fight. That's when they found us. The Cabal. Red Legion, we would later learn. They marched us north of the Winding Cove, set up camp within sight of the Shard. They ingested their libations, got rowdy. They knew we were lightless. They wanted to see what I was really made of. When I was just meat and air. I said, do your worst. And they did. Beat me within an inch of my final life, and then guffawed when Ghost couldn't do anything to get me back on my feet. They ingested more of their bevies, and one of them decided I had one eye too many. And he took it and popped it and laughed some more and asked what I was going to do about it. I laughed back, louder and crazier than they liked, and told them I had another. Then one of them, the worst of them, took hold of Ghost and said, I'm your ghost now. I'm the one who decides if you live or die. Ghost was just a pebble in its meat hooks. And with no effort at all, Ghost was in pieces. Before the sun rose, they threw me off a cliff. They should have put a bullet in me. They should have fed me to their war beasts. Figure Ghost chose me because I was some kind of hero in my before time. Maybe. More likely, I was just another killer. And I sure as hell didn't need no fists of havoc to get my hands wet proper. You who seek the forge, your journey will be long, but your destination is closer than you think. Oros. Commander, as best we can tell, they're all gone. Somehow the Legion found their outpost, and the Hunters say Centurions still hold the ruins. This was the last text transmission we got before the signal died. Sloan. The fire burned within us. Not by choice. Not because we sought the flame. But because there was no other way. When you stood before the forge, there was no doubt. No fear. Not even anger. My order stood for generations. We held against the shadow, bearing a weapon that seared flesh and melted bone. And now we stand at the end. May history remember the forge. Remember the hammer. Remember the Sunbreakers. Oros, third and final Imperial Magistrate of the Sunbreaker. Of the crumbling stone wall, the warlock looked up to the sky and frowned as thunder in the distance. Rain, he grumbled, and felt strength flow through him as he could and consumed the fiery grenade in his fist. Just what we need. The held low beside him. We'll be fine, she said, and there will be no rain. The warlock held his palm out, expecting to feel a drop on his taut glove. And feel it? That energy in the air. The storm's coming. I said we'd be fine, the hunter replied as she idly slid shells into her shotgun. Backup's nearly here, and there will be no rain. The air suddenly crackled around them. Sizzling fingers of arc energy danced across the barrel of her weapon. The warlock scrambled backwards. If the storm's not coming, he cried, then what the hell is that? Across the battlefield, the Titan landed in the midst of the enemy forces with a sky-splitting crash. That's backup, the hunter smirked.